right, I'm pumped. I had to do that obviously because of who you are and what your deal is. So I thought about this for like I've been really excited to do this, man. But I had to do that just because I was like, oh, this is his current identity for what he's doing. And so I'm really excited today, man. I got Seth Grenny on here. Just a couple of intro facts about you, man. You know, you're married to Jesse. You have a daughter, Lennon, with another child on the way. You're currently the vice president of the Notorious division at Legacy Power. You guys currently, after we just fact checked our numbers, 646 reps, selling about 5 to 6 megawatts of solar per month. Your best year in alarms, 316 accounts. Always love to see that golden door. And then, your best year in solar doing 247 accounts. So, yeah, man, I always like to do the same thing. So just go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, Seth.
Sure. So from Utah, grew up primarily in Orem. Kind of a non-traditional background and introduction to door, man. I spent my juvenile years and like early teenage years in a really nice little town called Orem in Utah. Have a phenomenal family, a dad and mom that loved me very much. Great background, like not a single complaint there. In fact, was born with every advantage possible. Dad taught me how to work, wasn't spoiled, but we were successful, just things were great. And started getting into trouble at a really young age. So by 8 and 9, I was getting in fights. By 12, I was getting kicked out of school, caught with drugs type of stuff. And, by 14, 15, getting locked up, running away from home, thrown out of the house, like that kind of stuff. So that was kind of my background. Growing up, and it was, I always like to be really clear when I talk about that, is I'm not like a disadvantaged youth, like I like to be careful with that one because it can sound really easy as I talk about like my first year in door to door, like I just had some disadvantage that the world was against me and it was so hard. That is not my story. My story is I could have had the best, most simple life ever, and I just decided to veer to the right and live a different life, and that's what I did.
No doubt, and thanks for being so transparent. And I can relate 100% to that type of life. So what, you got in trouble right away. Did you graduate high school or anything, or kind of what was that like, in the beginning?
Yeah. So I graduated from a lockdown facility called the Utah Boys Ranch. That's where I got my degree from. I was just kind of in and out of programs like that and running away from home to rougher neighborhoods, living with different families, got taken in by a Polynesian family, spent a lot of my young and older teenage years in a really heavily Polynesian community and best people in the world. Was a huge influence on my life, big impact on the type of person that I try to be. And yeah, so graduated high school, actually on time. School wasn't super hard for me, like it just kind of made sense. I was pretty good at the classes. I was pretty good at quizzes and tests, but I just didn't really want to go to school. But I wanted to sell drugs, like I grew up in a good neighborhood. I'll explain it, dude, but I like 11, 12 years old, and I'm looking around at these kids in my neighborhood, my friends from growing up, and I was just like, I don't want to be like you guys. I don't think this is cool. I want to do something else. And so I found a drug connection. This is a good story to give you an idea. I had to learn to sell. Wasn't initially a great salesman. So what I very first sold in my life was Lortab.
Oh yeah.
And I bought Lortab for $4 a pill.
Oh my God.
And I sold Lortab for $4 a pill. I made no money. So I committed felonies selling this stuff out of school for a $0 profit just because I wanted to sell drugs. Like that's Seth Grenny as a kid, dude. I was the stupidest idiot ever that just wanted to break the law and do stupid stuff and found a way to do it. Yeah, so that's how I started out. Graduate on time and spent the next 7, 8 years mostly in and out of jail. Never went to prison. Probably served, I think, to my best count, 2.5 years or so in jail over the years. Not a ton of time, but Just kind of had a rough, a really violent run, and in and out of trouble, really, really poor a lot of the time. Legit worked the corner for a couple of years, like the kind of stuff you hear about. It's Utah, so it's not like California where people are getting shot every day or anything like
Right.
that.
Right.
It was rough, and I put myself through it, and that was the life I sought out. So yeah, that's growing up for me.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful, man. Let me back up a little bit too, though, before we move on to the important topics of the podcast. But not to say that this isn't as important, but more like the specificity of it. Kind of, you come from a good family. You said, I don't really know much about your parents, but I've been kind of told about your dad. So what was it like for your parents, man? Like, you come from a good family. Orem, I know about Orem. Like my girlfriend's dad's from Nephi, so I'm familiar with like a lot of the Oregon. I mean, you could call them settlements, but the areas. So what was it like for your parents watching you do this, going from like a good kid to, I mean, pretty much right away going into this life?
Um, Probably mostly confusing. Like the only way that I can really empathize is that I would just be really confused if I was them, because I had no excuse. There was no major reason that pushed me there. There wasn't even really like an influence. Like there was an older guy that, ran with a gang that I thought was really cool when I was young. And so I started hanging out with him and got along with his friends. But like, other than that, there was no real trigger or reason that pushed me to do it. And if it happened with my kids and they had grown up the way that I had, I'd imagine I'd just be confused. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So what did you have support from them? Did they like kind of cut you off? Like, because I know just from my experience, like when I turned, I went, I was very successful as well in school, and then something happened when I was about 16, and I got a little bit of taste, a little bit of something, and it was on the wrong side of the street. My mom's like, at 18, she literally put my stuff outside and pretty much changed the locks and said, "Get out and don't come back." So was it kind of like that for you with them, or what was that experience with them like?
No, dude, they never, like my dad never flinched. Now they're really big on like doing the right thing. And what I mean by that is making sure that they're helping and not hurting. They're not, exacerbating the problem by giving me money when I'm a drug addict or anything like that. They were really careful about that, but they never gave up, dude. They put me through a big handful of rehabs. Every time I went to jail, my dad was there the first day on visiting days. Almost every time my mom too. I think there were a couple where it was just emotionally harder for her because she's a mom, But no, dude, they never flinched. Like they never gave up. They supported me in the best way they knew how. And oftentimes that was doing a hard thing and not the easy thing. I was saying no instead of yes. And I think that really helped shape me. They finally did reach a point when I got sober and when I turned my life around. And I don't know if one is the cause of the other, or in conjunction or whatnot. But the year that I really did change stuff, they actually did give up, and they actually did. And I wouldn't say give up, but they drew a boundary, and they're just
Right.
like, been doing this. It was 12 years deep at this point, like 12 years of jail and rehabs and drug addiction and injuries and violent, like everything that comes with the world that I chose. And they finally reach a point where they're just like, enough, we're done. And it just so happened that right at that point, I, was ready to make some major changes. The world that I'd come from, there's just a volume of chaos in that world that pushed me out and pushed me in a better direction, while I simultaneously discovered door to door, which for me is like just a huge part, I believe, of the reason I was able to change my life.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful stuff, man. So I also have to point this out because my girlfriend's dad, they have a home in Mike Holiday in Salt Lake, and then they also have a few homes on the North Shore of Oahu, and so they're very large in the Hawaiian community. So I didn't know Polynesians went to Utah. Did they go there after, because I know there's a pretty big, because there's a BYU on Oahu, right? So is
Yeah,
that kind of how they got to, how they get to Utah?
I think it's primarily a Mormon thing, man. So there's a really big Polynesian LDS community, and Utah obviously is a big LDS place, and so that's a big part of it. A lot of the people that I grew up with, their families came from California. They had come, from Samoa or Tonga to California, and then they came here. But different directions, but I think it's mostly the church that brings them to Utah.
No doubt, no doubt. And then so, you know, 2 points, right? So the first one, did you ever start making money, or were you still selling Lord tabs for $4 a rip forever? Like, did you ever figure, like, at what point did you figure out, like, yo, I'm not making any money, like I need to figure this? So like, when did that happen?
I figured it out pretty quick. I think the first time I got busted selling drugs, I was 15,
Wow.
and it was cool. And at that point, I was making like $2 a pill or something like that on the pills. It was enough to get me a free pill here and there, and by now drugs too, you know. And um, so I started making money there. By the time I was a later teen, like 17, and I'm legit like standing on a corner selling crack cocaine. I was making a little bit of money doing that, you know, and by like 19, actually I had developed like a really intricate and large empire, if you will, like that. I don't know how else to say it, but a couple of the dudes that still work with me now were around for that, and we did run a pretty large organization. We moved a lot and saw some pretty crazy stuff. So we did make money, but it was never your money, you know. Like I'd stack it up and I'd
Oh,
build,
wow.
and I'd get a couple cars in a nice place, and then I'd get my door kicked in and it's gone. It's gone, bro. It's not yours anymore. They took it. And so I never really had anything. And when I did have it, I was always so ready to lose it, just because kind of how I came up in that world too. Like I'm ready to lose everything at the drop of a hat anytime. So yeah, but I did make a profit eventually. I did figure out the game, and actually, dude, I think I learned a lot from that world. It was actually good for me. I'm not going to say I'm happy that I did the things I did, and that I'm super proud of who I was for 12 years of my life, but I learned a lot, man.
I feel that and I respect that because I have the same experience. The next thing that I wanted to add from that was, um, what did the Polynesian culture, family, what did they do? Like how, you know, what was that like for you? So what you said you learned a lot from them. What did they teach you?
So the family that took me in, there was obviously came mainly from, there's a buddy of mine that was close to my age that I was really close with, and I would I kind of manipulate them, like tell them I got kicked out of my house when really I ran away, and there's like police looking for me and stuff. But dude, they just were really accepting, as far as my own family. They fed me, they took care of me, they loved me when I was not a person that was easy to love, man. That community was really hard to get into. It's a very different community than how I grew up, and it's a lot of fights with people a lot bigger than me all the time. And when I say it taught me something, like it taught me to be tough, man. Like,
Right.
you know, there's people there that didn't like me because I'm not like them, or they didn't trust me or whatever. And so it took a long time to earn their respect and their trust. And oftentimes the way to do that is for them to test you, and they want to fight you when you're new, and they're going to fight you every weekend, and you're going to get your ass kicked every weekend for a few weeks in a row. And it's just part of getting into that world, man. But it was good for me, and I learned a lot from it.
Yeah, no doubt. I got a big head, so I'm easy to hit. So I feel that. So how old? So you're uh, how old are you right now? 31?
Third two.
32. And so how old were you when you got into like the Polynesian culture? What year was that? How old were you then?
I was 15 when I started hanging out with them. I don't think I really became accepted or part of that until I was 17 or 18.
17, 18. And then you kind of went in and out, different facilities, whatever, till you were 25. Is that what I'm catching?
Yeah.
24?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so then, you know, did you so what was like the last straw at 24 that got you out of all that stuff? What was kind of the turning point for you with all that, man? What was the moment that happened, you know, your seconds and inches, you know, your what was your moment of desperation there?
There was a lot of stuff. So I actually initially had, by 24, I've already been in door to door for a few years. I discovered door to door, and I spent my first 3 years doing security sales, trying to kind of do both. Like I stayed sober for the most part. I would relapse here and there. I would sell some security, but I decided that I should also like traffic heroin and cocaine while selling. And And so I thought that, you know, it would make sense to do both. And I ended up, it kind of all just came to a head in 2013. Like there was a point where a lot of my close friends had got arrested. One of my best friends just caught 165 years in prison. Like he's never going to see the light of day again. By now I've lost, I don't even know how many friends to like overdoses, violence, other stuff like that. Like I just had seen so much that you kind of get tired. And I realized how stupid it was of me that I'm making six figures selling security, and like I'm just clinging to this person that is not me, dude. It's not me. I've been trying to pretend like I'm someone that I'm not for a long period of time, and it's time to just figure out who I really am, which actually took me several more years, and I think I'm still learning about myself, of course. But um, yeah, I don't know that there's a single turning point. You know, at one point I lost the use of my right leg from the knee down. I had a really crazy experience night. I ended up overdosing. I ended up actually dying for almost 2 minutes there. My heart stopped. At the same time, I caught some new charges. You know, and this is kind of what my life looked like starting door to door, right? Is like I'm limping on this leg. I'm coming from a world where my ability to use my hands is like a big part of who I am, dude.
Wow.
And now I've got this leg that I'm like crippled. Like I'm not a threat to most people. You know, I had to figure out how to fight again over the years, but I'm not scary anymore. Like I'm limping around with a big leg brace on, so that's gone. I've lost my place to live. There's a girl who I'd been dating for a few years that I was really close with. She ended up kind of figuring out the type of life I'd been leading, leaving me one night randomly. Turns out she's pregnant. She has a baby while I'm in jail, places the baby for adoption. Um, and I'm like legit homeless and broke. Like everything I own, either the cops have taken, major crimes has taken it away, or I've sold it. Like I had nothing, dude. And so that was kind of the turning point, is like looking at my early career in door to door. What I had to my name, Zach, is I had these two black plastic trash bags. And I used to have this dope picture of me with those trash bags. I wish I still had it, but it was back then like phones. You lose your phone, you lose your pictures. You know, it wasn't like it is now, so it's gone. But I was really skinny. I had just gotten out of jail. And lost, like, you know, all the muscle from lifting weights, and just was skinny, not looking good, super pale, unhealthy, hair's all messy. I just look like crap. And I'm holding these two black plastic trash bags with clothes in them. That's what I owned. That's what I owned, man. That's all I had. Family's not talking to me, got nowhere to stay, had gone to a rehab, got kicked out because I'm an idiot, had gone to a sober living, got kicked out of that about a month later because I'm an idiot. And so I start knocking doors, man. Um, and that was what it looked like for me. You know, I got to a place where I didn't have a whole lot of options, but
Oh,
having this opportunity, like, you know, I hit up a guy that I had grown up with, and I didn't know a ton about security, like some of the guys that I had known growing up where I did. Like, door to door sales, and I didn't necessarily feel like I could trust a lot of them, but I could see that they were successful, and they definitely had better lives than I did, dude. So I hit one of them up, and I asked him if I could sell for him, and he said, I got a team down in Vegas right now doing like an end of summer extension trip. If you'd like to go down, I can get you down there. And I was like, yeah, could I borrow like a couple $100 for food to eat while I'm down? That's what it looked like, dude. No joke. And then I of course told him how good I am at selling stuff, because I knew I could figure it out. You know, so
no doubt, man. And I love that. And I appreciate it, man, because I have full, I went through a very similar circumstance. And I, at 22, found myself with too hefty. I always say that you're ready. You know, you've hit some bottom when you've got all you've got is two hefty bags. So I had two hefty bags full of clothes. I didn't have an ID. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have a bank account, and I had ran it all the way to the ground. So I respect the two black bags, man. I respect that. So around this time, so I'm glad that you corrected me. So you're getting out of this situation. You've got 2 bags. This is your first year going to doors when you talk to this friend. So
Yeah.
um I can't even imagine. So you're sucked up. I was 135 pounds when I got sober. You're sucked up, you're whatever. You go down to Vegas, which is just coming down to Sin City out. You know what I mean? It's just like you're just asking, it's like kiss of death. So you come down here, who's the company? How long did you do it that summer, and how many alarms? And what was that first time like?
So it was August of 2010. And I went down, and the group had just gotten there, I think a couple of days before me. And it was like, I don't know, probably 10, 12 dudes in an Airbnb over on the west side of Vegas. And dude, I was just done. Like I had no desire at this point in my life to use drugs or really like live that life anymore. Now, obviously, I made some other choices down the road that led me back in that direction. I needed another beating from the world, but at this point, I'm good. So I go down. I spend my first 2 days shadowing this guy on doors, and what he's doing is he's driving around looking for takeovers in alarms, and he's just looking for signs in the front yards of people's houses, and he's going and trying to convince them to switch to his company. And what I watched this guy get no sales for 2 days. I watched him bagel 2 days in a row, and I was like, shoot, this might be a little harder than I thought. But I did like watching him. I felt like I was better than him, you know? And I think a lot of people feel that way, especially people who are good at sales. I watch him. I'm like, well, you just said something that made her uncomfortable, dude. I wouldn't have said that. Like the way you're leaning in on this lady feels weird to her, and I can see that from here. Like, so I'm learning little things over the first couple of days. I also watch as like the whole group. There's like the whole group, and then there's Seth, and the whole group goes out and knocks at like 2-3 p.m. and they're done by 6-7 p.m. and they're headed to the strip, and they're coming back with cocaine, and they're coming back with oxy, and they're drinking, and they're it's like but I just don't care. I'm good, man. I'm good on that. I've been doing that for 12 years. I'm good. So I went to bed at 9 p.m. By myself, and I read my AA big book. I was doing AA real well at the time, and I woke up at 5 a.m. and I went to the gym, and I found, I think, a 6 a.m. AA meeting or something like that. Ate some food, and the third day I was just like, I'm gonna figure it out. So I grabbed some contracts. I actually ended up not grabbing the B form. There was an A and a B you needed, and I just didn't know. Like, I hadn't seen the kid get a sale, so I was like, whatever. So I just grabbed some A's, walk out, and I remember walking out the front door with this shirt on and this badge, and I have 6 pending felonies, and I'm limping, and like everything I own is in this room that I'm sharing with this other guy that can't sell a damn alarm. And I just was like, I guess I'm going left. I remember those words in my head. It's like 7:45 a.m. And as I walk out of this Airbnb, I ain't got no car. I'm just like, all right, I guess I'm going left. So I go to the left, and I start walking until I see a sign, and I knock it. And it took me until about noon to get a deal.
Wow.
But once I got a deal, I figured it out, and I was like, this isn't that hard. Like, all I'm doing is giving them a new panel. They're paying a similar thing, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. Anyway, I figured it out, man. So I ended up selling 5 accounts my first day, which I think is pretty rare in security. I haven't heard a whole lot about that. Like, if people doing that, it was good. You know, I felt really good about it. And I figured it out. None of them had a B form, so the tech had to come and do the B form. I think 4 same date and 5. One was a schedule out. Tech had to come do the B form later on. But I did really good, and then I did 3 the next day, and then I did 3 or 4 the next day. And it made sense. Like, people have always made sense to me, and working hard has always made sense to me. A couple of the things that I learned growing up, like I did, like getting into this community. We've talked a lot about like the Polynesian family that raised me. It was hard, man. And another really hard thing I did is I wrestled, and I wrestled my whole life. And I started when I was 6. And wrestling was, I was the #1 worst wrestler in the world until like the middle of junior high, bro. I started at 6. I started at 6 years old and I sucked until the middle of junior high. And even then, even into high school, like it just was so hard for me, but I never quit. I just kept coming back. Like I remember 7th grade is when it got big enough that like some people would watch my matches, 7th and 8th grade. And I lost every single match. I did not win one match until 9th grade. At one point I want to quit, and I go sit down and I tell my dad, and he's just like, he sits next to me, he pulls his chair up and he's like, Seth, we don't quit. He's like, if you teach yourself to quit at this point in your life, you're going to be a person who quits. You're not going to be a person who quits. That's not what your life is going to look like, and it's not going to start right now. And so I didn't quit, man. I guess the thought left my head at that point. I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to be a person who gives up on things. I ended up getting better. I was never the best wrestler ever. I have buddies that are best in class, that are awesome. And that was just never me. But I did stick it out, and I learned to work. And so fast forward back to this first year, I think that's what I had going for me, is that I had done a couple of really hard things, and I was tough enough to understand that like a few curveballs weren't going to get in the way of this opportunity. I had the opportunity to make $350 a sale, dude. And to me, like, having done what I have done in my life for $350, I have committed more felonies than I could possibly count for $350. And so that just blew my mind. So I was willing to do whatever it took. So yeah, you asked about year one. Year one was unique for me because it was a winter. I worked every day. I actually worked 7 days most weeks, but for sure at least 6. I didn't know what a normal schedule looked like, right? My only exposure to door is this office, but I knew from watching these guys, that's not normal. And so I decided to come up with my own. And what my schedule looked like is I would knock my first door before 8 a.m. and my last door after 9 p.m. And I would just cruise around on foot till I got a car. Then I got a car, I cruised around in my car. And I just managed myself with these rules. Like I realized that I'm a person, who does really well with structure and routine. And as long as I had those things present, that I figured I could have some success. And so every day I made sure that I knocked my first door by 8 a.m. Every night I made sure that I knocked my last door after 9 p.m. That Vegas thing lasted for probably 5-6 weeks. I ended up calling a couple of my like-minded friends down to Vegas that came from the same world I did. So there's 3 or 4 of us by the time the regional shut that office down, because nobody but us was selling. And they're like, we're closing this thing. Everybody come back. So I came back to Utah, and I moved into an extended stay hotel in West Valley, Utah, which is like, a little bit lower income part of Utah, similar to where I spent most of my teenage years. And so I'm living in an extended stay. And dude, everybody hears about this winter, and I get a lot of people that are like, man, that sounds rough. And bro, it was like the best winter of my life. Like, I had a car, I had bought this that had like 150,000 miles, and it was in my name, like instead of someone that I was paying to hide my money. And like, I had a driver's license, and I could like go out to eat and afford it, and nobody could take my money from me, kick my door in. I don't care. The money's mine. Can't have it. Yeah. Like, it was the coolest thing in the world. And I was making, thousands of dollars, and I just was on top of the world. So I knocked through the winter. Winter was really rough in Utah because it snows, and I'm a takeover guy. That's all I knew how to do at this point. So I'm just looking for signs, and there's 4 feet of snow. And so it's hard to see the signs. It gets dark at 4 p.m. So I'll never forget driving around in my little blue Honda Fit with the window didn't block it, and just looking in these front yards for signs, and just with the heat blasting because it's snowing. And that was what I spent my whole first winter, dude. Like, at 4 o'clock it's dark. I'm knocking till 9, so I'm rolling the windows down, I'm blasting the heat, and I'm gonna just keep going. And I did really well. That winter I sold a bunch of accounts. I think I had like 20 or 25 reps by the time that summer started in 2011. And I knew by the time that summer started that this was my life now. Like this was something that I could do. I had it figured out. I had a lot of learning to do. I really am not going to tell you that I thought I was a very good manager or a very good leader that first year. The fact that I had figured this out on my own and I legit made up my pitch. Like I didn't copy the dude's pitch that trained me. I made my own up. Um, so I kind of expected that of people. My recruiting pool was bottom of the barrel. Like there were gang fights in my housing all the time. The first year in the summer, I've had multiple reps die in the summer. Like my teams were very non-traditional, and they got a little bit cleaner over the years, but I've always had a real love and a real respect for people that came from where I did. So anyway, that first summer I funded 316. Team did I honestly don't 1150 or something like that. Wasn't great, but over 1,000, and was a good year. I made 150 grand that year, and it absolutely changed my life. And I knew that was what I was supposed to do. Like I knew that I was supposed to sell and train and recruit. I just wasn't very good at the second or third things yet.
Yeah, man, that's wow. I'm dope. That was a good answer to first summer, dude. So let me touch on a couple things here, man. So I wrestled for 1 year. I got pinned 18 times, and my wrestling coach said, "It's time to go back to band, bro." So I get sucking at wrestling, but I never got good again. What weight class did you end up like later on? Because I just have a lot of respect for any type of MMA. So like, how long did that carry into your life? Did you quit doing that kind of when you got rough, when things got rough and tough, or where did that go?
I wrestled all the way through my last year. I mean, there was no wrestling program at the place I graduated high school from. It was like a lockdown, but they had a high school. It was like a troubled youth facility. And I spent that whole season there, and then I also spent about half of, I want to say, my sophomore year at that same place, the Boys Ranch. But other than that, I wrestled every year. It was just part of who I was. I wrestled at 103 every year until senior year was 112.
Little pit bull.
I was a little guy, man. Which growing up the way I did made it even harder. Like
I can't even imagine. Yeah, that's 112 with the Polynesians, bro. That ain't no good look.
No.
So I do want to touch on this. So did that carry over into any other kind of MMA? Did you do any like UFC training? Did you take the street fighting into a cage? Like what happened there?
And so there were several years right after high school where that was kind of like my legitimate job would be. I worked as a bouncer for a lot of years at bars and clubs, and then for this private security firm. And then I fought for a few years. Yeah, did some training stuff. Was never exceptional. Was never crazy good or anything like that. I know how to use my hands. I definitely know how to wrestle. But it takes me a long time to get good at most things.
Finally, I have somebody. Mike Miller's going to listen to this because he's been complaining to me. He's like, all you have on the podcast are the best that have ever done it. They hit right from the beginning. And I'm like, well, some of us take a long time. So I can relate to that. Not that it took you a long time at Alarms because you did 316, but still, like, I can relate to that. So then I want to touch on your wife. So were you with your wife through this? Like, how long has Jessie been around, and what was her role in this time of your life, going down to the first summer in Vegas, coming back to West Valley, Utah? What was kind of her role there if she was around?
Yeah, she's gone at this point. So Jessie and I have a really crazy story, dude. We met when we were super young. And we met at a point where I was kind of trying to pretend like I was getting it together. I had just gotten out of jail. I'm living at my parents' house again, met her at a swimming pool. Actually, the night I met her, I feel bad that I put her through what I did. I do. And you could tell it's trouble. So the night we met, I got in a fight at a swimming pool that she was at with a friend of mine. And I had a big scab on my head right here. I still have a bald spot from the prior night where someone had broken a glass bottle on my head. And so when I got in this fight at the pool, it broke the scab open and I started bleeding all down my face. And so she invited me into her apartment to take care of me. So that's where I met her. In my head up and sanitize the blood and stuff. But we dated for 3 years, and then I got bad again, throughout that period a couple of times from what I remember. But I think I'd been selling drugs behind her back, and she didn't know. Started using, and she didn't know. And then she found out, and so just left me. And at that point, that's when it all kind of went to a head. She ended up getting pregnant, placing the baby for adoption, and then we didn't speak for several years. We didn't speak until, I want to say, 4 years ago or something like that.
Oh,
we
really?
might have talked, over the years, but we didn't have anything consistent.
Powerful, man. You and I are a lot alike, dude. My girlfriend and I met on MySpace when I was 19, you know what I mean? So like 12 years ago. And like we had been doing that song and dance for a long time for very similar reasons. My girlfriend runs a lot harder than I do. I try to pretend like I'm as tough as her, but I think she might be the toughest person I've ever met my entire life. So, we're on the straight and narrow at the moment together. So I can relate. And I have a lot of respect for people that, they come back together. I don't know. It's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful thing. And especially with, just working through adversities together, man. So I really appreciate that. And this is going to be
when they've seen you at your worst. I think, dude, that's when they've seen you at your worst. They've been there when you had nothing. I think there is a lot to be said about that when you actually end up achieving something with your life.
Yeah, Brooklyn's my biggest. Lee let me lead a correlation last week, which is pretty powerful for me. Kind of just going over goal setting and planning. And part of everything in my life, like I don't have a fixed mindset per se, but I come from, my parents did well until they didn't when I was about 16, and then everything was kind of gone. We were like lower middle class, so it wasn't anything crazy. So I don't have a hard time growing and getting bigger, but her comprehension of life is just so, she's never had to worry about anything. Right? She comes from a pretty affluent family, so she's always the one. And this came to a realization to me a couple of weeks ago, where she's always just the one to push me to the next level. So I think you're absolutely right to that. Like she saw me when I was just completely useless. Yeah, that's powerful. Thanks for that. So I want to go over this, man, because I've never knocked at 8 o'clock in the morning. So you decided one day, while in your first year with sounded like no training at all, you double A instead of an AB or a BB, slick, and you learn, you teach yourself whatever, hard knocks, here we go, I'm going to run it, I'm going to grind it out, and then you literally decide I'm going to knock from 8 to 9. Who knocks the door at 8 o'clock in the morning? I just want to know, like, what was that like, and why did you do that, and what was the reception from the other side of the door?
You get a mixed reception. So I think where that came from, like, if I'm honest, is my background of selling drugs is just like, I took it all the way back to when I was on a corner. And I learned at that point in my life that the more hours you put in, you have to put in more hours if you want to make good money. And that was just, part of my cognition at that point. So I think that's where it came from, is just, I knew I could work really hard for a long period of time. I knew this opportunity was nuts, and I had no idea if I was going to be really good or really bad or how hard it was going to be. But I knew that I better make it work. Like, I actually wasn't even supposed to legally be out of the state of Utah. I could have gone to jail for my first 3 full years of knocking doors. Anyway, that's another story. But so I wanted to make the most of it. And I also, dude, I didn't know any better. I really didn't. Like, I thought that was what it was. I knew that people knocked doors. I knew that they worked really hard when they did. I hadn't had any really close friends that were door-to-door security or anything else guys at the point. Not that I talked to about it at length. And so I just really didn't know any better. I was just like, this is what I'm going to do. This is what my schedule is going to be. And I just felt, this feeling of extreme gratitude for the opportunity to change my life, to do something different, for the opportunity to really just like be somewhere else, doing something else than I had done for the previous 12 years of my life. And I felt like the best expression of gratitude that I had. And to this day, that's probably my biggest secret weapon is gratitude. I just figured I'd make the most of it. The reception where I was, I actually am kind of lucky I don't remember a lot of the other days very clearly though. I remember my first day and my second day and every single one of the sales that I sold. And a lot of them were older people. And so over that first year, because I did carry that schedule all the way through till summer and then past summer into the next year, I I learned to prospect a little bit at a time, and I started discovering that older people are happier in the morning, and you want to knock them in the morning. They've been up since 5. They've had their coffee. They got their newspaper. So it's actually the happiest time of their day is old people. And so I'm not going to say I knew that when I first started. I didn't. I got mixed receptions. I got people yelling at me that it was 8, and I got people who acted like it was perfectly normal, and I had people who were happy to see me. Like anything else.
Yeah, I was calling Lee the other day because I was in Sun City Aliante, and I'm like, how do you do the old people? Like, help me with the old, but obviously kind of like joking with him because there's a few reasons. So I appreciate that. So you kind of come in here, you do the deal, you're leading this double life still through this time. You go into the your first summer going into winter again. So what is this like year 2, year 3 before you kind of decide like, I don't want to be in this other life anymore. I just want to stick to the doors. Sounds like you're alone too, right? Like your wife, Jess isn't around, so what was that whole experience like?
Yeah, so it was after that first summer that I decided to get back into selling drugs. And I had made good money, and I realized that I could really quickly turn that money into more money. And so I decided to do that. And I did for the next couple of years. It wasn't like a full-time thing like it had been at other parts of my life, but it was like on the side, and I had other people, very limited amount of people involved, and I had other people running it for me, and I was just trying to make an income off of it. I think if nothing else, just because I was kind of addicted to the person that I used to be, and also to that lifestyle. It really wasn't about the money, man. But I got to 2013, and I just had this moment where I kind of got sucked all the way back into the person that I used to be, and there was some behavior popping up, and got myself into an experience where I was about to make some choices that very likely could have gotten me killed or landed in prison for the rest of my life, or caused me to have to flee the country. Like something crazy was going to happen.
Right.
And it was all this, I've just decided to try and continue this old behavior on the side while living this new life, while honestly trying to pretend like I'm a changed person, and just not actually being the person that I want to be. And there was just this moment where I'm about to make this horrible life altering decision, and circumstances led up to me just getting a God shot right before it happened. And it just stopped. It just stopped the behavior. And it's one of those moments that will be with me for the rest of my life. I remember it clear as day, the way that I felt, the way everything sounded, the temperature outside. And there was just a random circumstances where a person showed up at the perfect time to get me to rethink what I was about to do. And I did, and I rethought it, and that was it. That was it for me. I was done. I was out, and I changed, and I decided not to do that anymore. And so that was the last time that I went back into that world, looking to make money on the side.
Yeah, that's man, powerful. In kind of where I come from too, we call that seconds and inches. I believe the opportunity opens the door, and we can either walk through the door or not. And I'm not saying that opportunity doesn't come again, but I think for somebody like yourself and myself, but I'll speak for you right now, is that just like you took the opportunity, right? The door opened and Seth walked through it. So I got a lot of respect, and I really appreciate you sharing that stuff with us, because I know it can be a little bit, it's a thing, man. And so when this event happens and you kind of just get on the straight and narrow, so to speak. How old are you? Are you 25 at this time?
No, this would have been 23.
23. Okay, so 23, and we've been in the door game 3 years now at this point.
Yeah.
Okay, and so then what happens? Where are you at? I know you eventually go to Vivint. So like, where are you at then? And then what was your journey to Vivint?
Yeah. So after that moment, I start the change in the right direction again. And for me, my story, there's a lot of just little gradual and big changes that I made. It wasn't like, oh, I turned and now I'm a good person. It was like, oh, you like 9 out of 10 areas, but now you're going to get slightly better in 1 out of those 9 for the next year. And that's what it looks like for me. So I spent 2 years, 2.5 years at an ADT dealer. Awesome experience for me. I actually made the best money per account that I've ever made there. The guy I worked for is still a really good friend of mine. I talk to him on a regular basis. Just a stud of a human being. I learned a ton from him. And it was a good experience. What I learned there that I didn't know that I had learned until I was at the next place, which was Vivint, was that I am a person who is better when I just train, sell, and recruit. I don't do well with other things on my back. I'm not good at designing competitions. I'm not good at running payroll. I'm not good at any of the minor details. Now, this company did many of those things for me, but it was a dealer program. So what I found there is that I stayed flat. And in fact, my personal sales decreased a little bit. Most years I was over 300. I think I was high 200s there a couple of one of the years or something, and had a hard time, funding my 300 a year there in personal accounts. And that was just because I was busy. There's people who that is the perfect path for them, and they should be a business owner, or they should be a dealer program or something like that. And as soon as I got to Vivint and plugged in there, I learned that that's not me. That's not me. My brain is really good at doing one thing. And if I can just focus on one thing, put blinders on and think about nothing else, that's what's going to be best for me. So, I had met with Vivint a few times over the years. I met with the Browns. I think right after I sold 300, they'd heard and they got my number from someone. Met with Jason, awesome guy. Met Casey Baugh, I want to say, in actually maybe 13 before I went to the dealer program, and just loved him. Like, I just loved him. I met him once, and that meeting was one of those moments where I felt like I learned a lot. That the guy who brought me to that meeting kind of tricked me and like told me, yeah, we can match the pay this ADT dealer is offering you. We can offer the deal. We can match the signing bonus, everything they're doing. Just come talk to us. And I think he just wanted to get me in a room with Casey, which rightfully so. He's an amazing human being. So he got me in the room, and the conversation starts, and I'm like, yeah, so this is what I need. I need 1,000 per account up front. I need to be able to put my reps on whatever pay they want. I need access to this much money in signing bonuses. And he's like, I can't do most of that stuff. And I was like, why am I here? I just drove an hour to get here. But whatever it was, dude, I left that meeting and I was just like, man, it's an amazing human being right there. Ended up meeting with Bodie while I'm at the ADT dealer. Had some frustrations with the way my program was working, and in hindsight, a lot of that was on me. I was making mistakes. I was being hard-headed. I was not a person who had learned how to train well yet. And so Bo flies me out. I meet with Bo, and I just admired him immediately. I start coming at him with all these negotiation tools, and I need this and that. And I had a really good deal. He took super good care of me, but he also told me the truth immediately. He was just like, nope, not doing that. Nope, that's not how that works here. Nope, your program's not going to work that way. If you want to succeed, like, you need to do these 3 things. And that was what my first recruiting meeting with was Bodie. And it was the opposite of like every other recruiting meeting I'd ever had. And I was just like, I can work for you. You're a badass. Like, this dude is hard. I can work for him. And so I did. I went to Vivint, and was there for several years. And that was one of the biggest learning experiences of my whole life. I worked with some really high level people. And one of my biggest sources of gratitude. And one of the things that I really try to stress to the people that I work with is that we have this unique ability in door to door to be exposed to some of the most high level human beings on the face of the planet. And you get to learn so much from these people, and a lot of people really take that for granted.
Wow.
I don't feel like I did that, man. I feel like every moment that I had with these guys that I really admired, I remember those moments, and I remember taking notes, and I remember what I learned from them. And I to this day feel extreme gratitude for all of that. So that was one of the things that I really felt like I got at Vivint. Was I got to learn from extraordinarily talented and brilliant and hardworking people. And that was really good for me because I needed someone to push me. Before that, I'd kind of been swimming in tiny little ponds, and I don't think I was ever the big fish, man, but in my head I was, you know. And Vivint, and not even my head could tell me I was the big fish there. And so spent a few years there, met some people that will be family to me for the rest of my life, and learned so much about myself, about leadership, about development, from watching their systems and the way their systems are programmed for new reps, the way their competitions platform drives insane amount of production and competition. I learned that that was the type of business that works for a person like me. And that's what I left Vivint with, was with the knowledge that I can succeed as long as I have the right company with the right systems and processes behind me. And I should not do a dealer program. That was the other thing that I knew. Once I was there, the way that my life went, you know, I still worked just as hard. I kept the same schedule where I was there. I ended up doing this year-round thing, which for me, in hindsight, was definitely not a good thing, because what I ended up doing was working all year instead of all summer for those 12, 13 hours a day, for the same amount of accounts. And, you know, it just wasn't, because I'm in one market and I'm a takeover guy and I'm used to doing other things. And I sucked when I first got to Vegas. I had to relearn how to work an area for this city for year after year after year. Big learning experience for me. Happy I did it. If I wanted the most successful thing, though, I should have stuck to Summers.
First of all, what I want to say is I agree. And it's funny because Lee and I recruited 2 people on Saturday, and I do that. I meet people at the gym because my main, you know, I think I'm pretty good at the door, and I think I'm pretty good at the home, but I think I'm really good at recruiting. Like, I think I'm confident to say I'm good at it. And Lee's given me the ability to recruit better, more efficiently, etc. But I give them a little taste in the beginning, you know, a little intro, and I bring them to Lee, and Lee closes them every time, right? Unless they're mental midgets, but whatever. So my thing is you bring up Casey and Bodie, man, and I'll say this, like I'm honored because I had no clue. I brought this podcast up to Lee. I said, we need content. It's the way the industry's going. It's the way the world's going. And at first it was slow. We had one general idea, and we've talked about this before. And then he gets Casey Bond, and I didn't know who the hell he was. I'm like, I don't know who this guy is. I've never heard of this guy. He's like, who cares, you know? And then on Instagram he buys a plane, and I'm like, all right, I can talk to him. You know, he's bought a plane. He's you know, I can. And I had Casey on, and Casey blew my mind. And then we had Bodie on. And every time we have a new guy on, and I'm going to include you in this exact statement, it's just like I learned so much that I've become so good in my life and at the door, on top of all the training Lee's provided me, which is, it's priceless. But, you know, I agree with you. Like, and we've had some of those guys on this podcast, and it's unprecedented just what type of value they provide. And, you know, so why do you think the summer program was going to make you more successful overall? Like what was it about the summer program?
I think for me, in alarms is a fast sell. And what I had spent, you know, at this point, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years getting really good at is getting in a house really quickly, building a fast relationship with the customer, developing trust, and getting back out. And most of my sales took me 30, 40 minutes, and I'm in and out, boom, boom. And that's what a takeover looked like for me. Now I'm selling a different product at Vivint. There's consumer financing involved. There's a loan. We're, charging way more than I'm used to charging. And so all of that was actually really good for me and ended up being one of the best things ever by the time I got into solar. But just looking at those few years, if we wanted to say, where would Seth Grenny have been most successful? I was good at summers. I knew how to target takeovers. I knew how to tell what market was going to be good what year. I knew how to take a group of people there. I knew how to hit the easy accounts and then move to the next market. And that's what I've been doing. And it's not what I ended up doing. What I ended up doing is moving and working a year-round program in Vegas. And I did well, and it was good. And like I said, wouldn't be anywhere remotely close to where I am today had I not made that decision. But for those years, I would have seen more success had I continued doing the summer thing.
No doubt, and respect for that. How long were you in Vegas?
Before I moved back to Utah, or just for Vivid?
Just in general, yeah. Well, 5, you said? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then how old were you when you moved back to Utah?
31.
31. So you just moved back. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what I'm hearing is you went from not knowing a thing to making something work with just true grit, which is just we shouldn't even call it door to door anymore. We just need to call this true grit. Like that's you're going to get, if you stay here 5 years, you're going to learn how to be the baddest self you've ever been your whole life. And you're going to accomplish more than you've ever. I mean, I love this because anytime I recruit a new person, and Lee and I, it's funny because we're almost like synced on our thoughts. Like send them this podcast first and then this one and then make them, because it's recruiting tool. You guys are recruiting tools for me. So thanks. Don't get mad. Don't play that for legacy. They might get mad, but no, I'm just kidding. But I think they're just recruiting tools overall. Because even my own mother, who's 68 years old, who's been in sales her whole life, is getting crazy amounts of stuff out of it. But so you were in Vegas this time. And then how long was the Vivint tenure? And then where did you go after Vivint?
Yeah. Dude, the years get hard for me. I have been knocked out and done a lot of drugs. And so I like it, though. I'm not committing to any of these timelines. I want
that's
that.
Fine. Right,
I think I was there for 4 years before, probably a little less than 4 years. And so then, then there was just a series of events at Vivint where there was a lot of drama. There was some hardship between the people I worked with and me. And at the same time, Lee, who you work with, had started doing solar and was making more money than me. And I'm a pretty it probably doesn't look this way because I've worked at 3 different companies in the alarm industry and had little stints where I almost worked with another one or something like that. But I'm a pretty loyal dude. Like when I left, there was a really, really good reason for it every single time. And it was, I felt that I was forced to leave. So I'll just leave that as a B. But I had known solar could probably be better. I had some really good friends that worked in the Vivint Plus office down there that were just, man, I love these dudes. To this day, I talk to them on a regular basis. And I'm watching people that I feel like, I can sell circles around, make more money than me. Not that Lee's one of them, but Lee, I think I can beat your ass still good in sales. And it just, it by the time everything happened at Vivint, I knew solar was probably the move. But what you have to understand is like yourself, I'm going back to 2010 and now I've built a house. I'm married. I have a dog. I'm driving a Mercedes. Like things are going really well for me. And I used to just have these 2 black plastic trash bags. And so imagining shifting industries horrified me, dude. Just horrified me, even though I knew I could probably figure it out.
Wow.
That was really hard. So I actually called up my buddy who owned the ADT dealer thing. And I said, I just want to run some deals through you for a little while. Well, I figured this solar thing out. I don't know what I'm going to do. We'd kept a good relationship. So I did that again, made killer money with him. And I started vetting solar companies. And I over the next probably, 3-4 months, again, timetables are really hard for me. I'm just not good with them. But over the next 3-4 months or so, I met with over 20. I met with 22 solar companies. Sold deals through 7 of them, and I vetted them really thoroughly. I ran first. The first thing I did was I worked with Lee for a minute, and we wanted to build something together. And I think that I just decided, like, for me to build what I needed to build, I had I had to find like a full service company. I was not capable of building something where I had anything to do other than train, sell, and recruit. And I think you guys have it dialed in a way now where it's like that. At the beginning, there was more to it, and I knew that I needed a big company. I needed a big name. That was what I needed for my future. So I met with everybody, dude. I met with every company everywhere. I sold a ton of accounts through different people, and it really boiled down to, do I go to Vivint Solar? Do I go to Legacy Power? For what I was looking for, I needed a full service platform. I needed a sales support staff in the back office to answer all the stupid questions I don't want to answer for my reps. I've already seen through the accounts that I sold at, like Arcadia, like I've seen that I'm going to make more money. This is going to change my life. I know it at this point. I also know that I have a track record of the last, 8 years in alarms, of meeting people, of keeping my word, of being a good person. And I don't say this to brag, but what I built now came because of the type of person that I chose to be over those years. I took care of people. I paid guys their back ends, even if they left during the summer. I kept my word to the companies. Like, I did what I said I would do for the most part. And I feel like I did my best to be a good person. And I knew because of that, that I had a lot of relationships in the door-to-door industry that would help me build something. And I needed a platform that could immediately scale me nationwide in multiple states, however I wanted it to scale. So my options were Vivint Solar and Legacy when I really got down to it. Legacy's comp was way better. The pay was way more aggressive. And there was some political stuff at Vivint Solar that I felt like was going to be tough for me, given the fact that I'd been at Vivint Inc. for a long time. And, leaving a place like Vivint where they put a lot into you and they care deeply about you, it's hard to leave, and it's hard for them to see you go. And so, it made sense for me to go where I could start over, where I could build, and where I had a platform that I could scale. And that's what I found at Legacy. It was the second I decided on Legacy and knew that was the place, it wasn't a decision I ever questioned. Like, I knew 100% the second I made that decision, this is the right place for Seth Grenny to go right now.
Yeah, I love that. I interviewed 8, and then I met Lee, and then it was like, it was like love at first sight. So I can vibe with that, dude. I never,
hard, huh? I wanted to work with Lee so bad, man, so bad.
I feel that, but I mean, sometimes it's like birds of a feather, dude. And like, I got a friend who owns a roofing company that makes a lot, 50, 100 million a year. And like, he's tried to recruit me multiple times. And I'm just like, so I've similar experience. But I think so I hadn't even knocked the door before that, but whatever. I always told myself I had, but never, no. This is my favorite, especially coming in front of guys like you and Lee. Lee's like, pitch me. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you suck, sit down, So I came in at 31. But so here's the deal, man. You make all these decisions. You end up at Legacy. You had sold a couple solar accounts before that, right? You started Legacy 2020 in COVID, or did you start Legacy 2019?
19. This was the summer in 19.
2019, and then you came in as a rep,
pretty much, yeah.
Like, just as did they have setter closer model? Just
wasn't a closer. Like, I'm a seasoned door-to-door guy, and so the company could tell that I was going to be able to do something. To this day, like, Doug loves to joke about this tattooed felon walking in my office, and I don't know who he is, and limps in here. They didn't know, dude. Yeah, I came in legit as a rep. There was a separate organization present in Vegas. I met the leader of that organization, and I knew that I needed to build my own thing.
Okay, and so at that time, how many years had Legacy been in business?
They started in the end of the year in 14, so they're
2014.
4 years deep. Yeah, a little over 4 years deep.
And how were they doing then? Were they killing the game? Like, 2019 legacy, we're doing, how, a megawatt a month, or how were they doing overall as a company before you got there?
Oh, they were. I mean, they've been the big boys for a long time. So they were at the time, I think, the third biggest, because that's before Vivint Inc. or Vivint Solar and Sunrun merged. So there was those two that were bigger, and I think Legacy was third.
Right behind them.
Yeah, they were killing it, dude. They were big. They were a very, very PPA heavy company. That was all that anyone in the whole company sold. Loans are a pretty new thing. Lee had taught me about those. And so, I knew loans were the future, like just from my own purchase on my house that Lee had sold me the solar, like it made sense. The solar made sense to buy it. I wouldn't have wanted to lease it. So
no doubt. So you come in I love this because Lee and I have sat down with I think it's two guys now who are they're not a model of a Seth Grenny, but they sold a few accounts in their life. It's always interesting when you bring guys in, and I'm seeing it now, the more that they're in front of Lee and watching Lee, use a sales cycle on a rep and hearing a rep go like, oh yeah, I do 15. Well, how many did you do last month? Well, I did 2, right? So like it unfolds of like this and this, and you're like, bro, you're not even worth like what I thought I was going to give you. And now you're going to go do pest control. I started a whole drama series about pest on social media the other day. I'm like, you're going to go sell pest instead of solar? I'm like, holy moly. Anyways, so you come in as who you are, knowing what you're capable of doing, 8 years of vet, of knocking under your belt. You tell Doug, I'm coming in as a rep. You didn't say like, hey, do you have a team I can manage? Hey, I know you guys are floating 50 guys over there at this office. They need it. You came in like, look, I'm gonna go knock doors. Give me, just give me a t-shirt and a hat. Right. So yeah. You come into this organization, and what happens when you get there?
It's me and one other dude. I have a knocking buddy with me who'd been a partner that previously had worked with me at Vivint. And they're selling all PPAs. It's a big office of really young kids. And I didn't like the PPA thing. I think their culture was just a little bit different than the one that I had been building of my own and teams that I'd run for the, prior 8 years or so. And so we kind of just did our own thing. We recruited a ton of people right away. We just started selling. That first week I went out and I did 7 accounts. And I remember on Saturday night, like I just had my blinders on that whole week. And I remember driving home Saturday night after my first week at Legacy. And I don't usually do this. Like I have all these rules around my knocking hours. You can't talk on the phone, no social media, don't text me, like just leave me alone when I'm knocking. But I broke that rule and I called my wife, and I guess I was done for the day, but I called her. And I was just like, honey, I don't know if this is real. I don't know if these accounts are actually going to install. I don't know what's going to happen exactly, but it looks like I just made $86,000 this week on these 7 accounts that I just sold. These things actually install. Our life is going to change. This is going to be really different. Like the next year of your life, my life is going to be really, really hard, and you're not going to see me, and you're not going to feel like you know me. And I need you to be okay with that. But if you are, I promise you, we're going to build something that's going to be really big, and we're going to set ourselves up for a future that someone like me I never even dared to like imagine I would have built what I ended up building. And I didn't even know at the time that it was going to be what Notorious is now, but I did know it was going to scale, and I did know I was at the right place. And man, you talk about meeting people you admire, like those first meetings with Luke Toon, who's like, I'm a 300 guy in my good years, right? In security. Luke's a 550 guy, like just makes me feel like a bitch when I sit in the same room as them. And Doug, who's everything, like since the very first Atlas, like back in the day, was the president of sales and DirecTV. Like I worship these dudes. I still do to this day. Like one of the main reasons that I'm so grateful for my time in door to door is because it led me to working for these 2 men that I get to spend my days around, learning from. And I had a piece of that at this point on this Saturday night. It's another one of those moments. I'm driving home. I call her and I'm like, I have a theoretical $86,000 in the pipeline from my first week in solar. I can only imagine what I'll do when I'm actually good at this stuff, you know? So that's what it looks like as it's new. I'm there for maybe 3-4 months. Legacy, right as I started, was in the process of transitioning from selling only Sunrun to being a multiple installer platform. And that was one of the things that really got me is, I mentioned when Bodie recruited me, I felt like he told me the truth. And I had this experience with Doug, the CEO of Legacy, where I'm sitting in his office and, the other guys are offering bigger bonuses or whatever is going on. And Doug's just like, I'm just like, so tell me what's going to be hard about this. He's like, everything. He's like, this is going to suck. It's going to be the worst thing you're ever going to do. You're going to feel like you're putting your head through a concrete wall. We're about to change from using only Sunrun to using other install partners. We know we can do it, but it's going to be really hard to do. You're going to be the tip of that spear if you're a person that sells loans. No one in my company sells loans, and you need to be ready for that. And that was like the most raw truth from a dude that I worshiped before I met him. Like that was why I knew I needed to work for him. But he was right, is the reason I bring that up, is he was right. It's really, really rough. So we start using other installers. And I very quickly built a relationship with the people at Titan. And I grew to like them very much. I met the CEO, immediately admired the hell out of that dude, wanted to be just like him, wanted to be his friend. He had just started working with his director of partner relations, who I thought was just an awesome human being, and I wanted to work with him. So I started building these relationships that are really good, but it was rough. I think my first install was over 4 months in Vegas with them.
Wow.
And it's their fault. That wasn't a them thing. That was the fact that my company, Legacy, is only used to using a certain installer, and they do things a certain way. And here's this other installer that does a completely different thing. Also, by the way, we're doing loans. It just didn't match up. So it was really hard at first. But I get it through to where I have hundreds of thousands of dollars in the pipeline, and I've got 5, 6, 7 reps starting to come and start to work for us now from, security companies or whatever. And then there's this moment at Legacy that was really hard for all of us, where a huge group of people, a large portion of the company, decided to leave and start another company. And the vice president, who was in the role that I essentially have now, took his organization and started a new company. And that was really hard to watch. I watched 2 of the men that, I admired more than anyone I've ever met in my life have to figure out, how do we rebuild this monstrosity of a company that we've built that is now just getting decimated while we're not looking? What do we do? And so that was hard. So that whole Vegas team left, and it was just me in Vegas and my 3, 4, 5 guys or whatever. And we're by ourselves, and we have this office, and I'm like, all right, cool. So the second I found out about that, I FaceTimed Doug and I said, I'm here, I'm good, I'm not going anywhere. We're good, dude. And funny side note there is our reporting software wasn't catching Titan deals yet. So at the point where I call him, I've actually been the top rep in the company for like the past 3 months. Like I've outsold everyone in the whole company every week without fail. But he has no idea because it wasn't on grid. And I'm not going to tell him. That's awkward. Hey, by the way, I'm your best. So I just he's like, oh, okay, cool. I'm happy you're here, dude. Happy to hear it. And we didn't end up getting the reporting fixed for like another couple months. I ended up having to start texting him like, hey, you guys said the top rep did 9 last week. I did 13, just so you know. Like, hey, it's not on grid, it's not on the calls, but that's what it looked like, dude. It was hard as we got it figured out. We had a lot of complications. And this is a big company, this isn't a little group. We still had hundreds of people there. So I just kept working, man. I had my schedule. I'm knocking every door by 8. I'm knocking after 9. I have my rules. I'm not taking time off. I don't stop if I have a migraine. I don't stop if I'm sad. I just knock. Every day I'm just on doors. And that's actually how I recruited. is like I would call people and I would be like, dude, how much did you make last week? All right, I just want to tell you about this opportunity. It's a lot more fun to sell. It's a lot lower pressure, blah, blah, blah. Come hang out on the doors with me tomorrow. And it was just non-negotiable. I didn't miss the doors. And so all my recruiting was done with people driving the car with me, with my knocking buddy. And they just knock with us. Like that's all they do. And we talk in between and figure out the pipeline and stuff with Titans. So that's what the first several months look like is a few months of quiet. Then there's a big disruption, a big storm, a big part of the company leaves and we start to rebuild. And I got the privilege to be part of that.
Okay, bro. Lee's always like, be careful who you compare yourself with. And I've been telling him, I'm like, I'm coming for him. Or I'm coming for your boy. I'm coming for Seth. Like you better watch out, you know? And it's just like, cause you're just such a good dude, man. And I got a lot to say about you too on a side note, but I texted you that the other day, man. I had a goal and I do want to, there's a lot that I want to touch on here, but I want to touch on this one thing real quick. Is I set this goal 6 months, and that's 8 months ago now to sell 5 in a week. And ever since I heard Casey, I've been writing my goals every day. I've been reading 30 minutes a day, sometimes 2 hours, which I want to touch with you real quick before we move into the other part of this. But I wanted to sell 5 in a week. I sold 5 in a week. Then a couple weeks later, I did 6. Then I did 7. Then I did 5. And now it's like 5's like, okay, bro, big deal. And you posted your Notorious thing, which, you know, I am a content consumer. I just am. And, you know, you had a guy, it's like number one, I don't know if it was just Notorious or just an office. It might have just been an office. Guy does 10, second place is 8, third place is 7. And then it's like from 4th place to like 50th place, all of them sold 5 in a week, right? So I'm like, okay, you know, so I hit you. I'm like, I did 7. You're like, 7's good. And I'm like, hell yeah, 7 is good, but 10's better and 13 is really good. And so now my goal is, and that's what's cool for me, bro, is this, I'm a first year rep. And for me, it's that 10 is very possible. It's possible. 13 is possible. You know, you did 13. So I appreciate I want to say that I just appreciate all of that, because whether we're in the industry, we're it's just cool to see like somebody else is setting a new bar, you know? So for you, you know, you made 86 grand in a week. I remember the first time I did 20 grand in a week, I was blown away. So that's another goal. I'll put 100 down in a week now. I don't need it. We'll get into Big Check Friday in a minute, but when you started, so Jess is here now. She comes back while you're at Vivint, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And what is she, when you go to Jess and you say, because you and Jess remind me a lot of myself and my girlfriend, which I really love, man. You go to Jess, you say, it's going to be this. What does she say to you?
Dude, she's the perfect wife for me. She's the perfect wife for me because I am an extreme human being. Like, whether it's working out, whether it's work, no matter what I'm doing, shoes, like I've recently gotten into shoes and I have a filled with shoes now. And I've spent more money than I used to make in a year, in a month, on shoes. And I'm just extreme. And she knows that, but she's tough. Like she's a tough girl. And so she was like, okay, I'm ready for this. Like even when she came at Vivint, like I was still working just the same crazy hours. It just wasn't the same hours plus building an office, right? And then a region and then division. Like there's a lot more to it than just knocking as a rep. So she didn't flinch at all. She was like, when we got married, when you were at Vivint, you told me this was what life was going to be like, was that we're going to find ways to make time for each other. And also that you're going to be a person that works a lot. And I was fine with that. And I support you. And she never complains. She really doesn't. I'm really lucky that way. I have, you know, friends that I've worked with over the years whose wives have a lot harder time with them being gone or traveling or putting in long hours on the door. And I know it's hard for her, but she just backs me up and she does everything she can to make it easier for me. She has dinner for me when I get home and you know, tries to make sure that I have everything I need so I can go to the gym early enough in the morning that it doesn't affect my knocking hours, like stuff like that.
No doubt. So mad love to the wives and the girlfriends and all of them that come to war with us, because that's really at the end of the day what this is. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So mad respect to your wife. And so for me, you sell 7 that first week. What I want to touch on your rules. So you mentioned you had rules. So what were your knocking rules? What were they?
Yeah. So first one is I'm always going to come from a place of gratitude. And that's the one thing that I've actually done right since 2010, man, is I just, whether it's I'm grateful for the mentors that I have, grateful for the opportunity not to be the person I like, I'm grateful and I stay in a place of gratitude to the best of my ability at all times every day. So that's rule number one. Rule number two is I have non-negotiable hours. Those hours generally were 8 to 9 or 9 to 10, depending on, if it's the summer competition, stuff like that, I'll knock later. And during those hours, I have non-negotiable rules. I did not social media. I did not talk on the phone. I would text if you work for me. My wife and close friends and family members knew that if you need to talk to me, probably just do it on a Sunday, because I'm going to be on doors all day and then I'm going to come home, be busy. And so like, talk to me on Sunday if you need to talk to me. And they knew that, like, those are my rules, man. And the people around me respected that. So, didn't talk on the phone. I didn't do distractions, anything that was going to take me out of a headspace where I was dialed in and focused on what I was trying to do, which is, talk to people about solar or security or whatever. Distractions weren't okay. I did not take time off unless I had scheduled it at least 2 weeks in advance. That probably sounds really dumb, but I did that because I'm a person who does well with routine and with boundaries. And I know that if I allow myself to ever once say, I don't feel like working today and then not work, that's going to be something I do again. And I've never done that. I've never done that. I've been doing this 11, 12 years now. Never once have I woken up and said, I don't feel like working today. Not once. And that's because I govern myself with rules. So for me, these rules are really valuable. I work through injury, and sometimes that's not a good thing. Some of this stuff is a little extreme. At one point, I broke my foot at Vivint, and it was a competition week. And so I ignored the fact that I had a broken foot, and I continued to knock, and I ended up needing surgery, which took me off doors for like 3 weeks. And that sucked, so it's not always a good thing, but I manage myself with rules. So I go to the bathroom in area. I know my first door before I go to bed tonight. I know my first door tomorrow, if that makes sense. Like, yep. I have a plan. I know what areas I'm going to knock all day while I'm in the area. I know what I'm going to eat, when I'm going to eat it, what I'm going to drink. My whole day is planned out. There's never a moment for me to sit and think, what do I do next? Because when I sit and think, what do I do next? I'm wasting time, and I leave room for myself to say, what I do is take a rest. And that's not what I need. That's not what a person who's grateful for, their life changing the way that mine has does. What a person who comes from a place of gratitude does is they make the most of this shit every day. And that's what I've tried to do.
Okay. So let's go into, dude, I'm stealing it. Love it. So, and everyone's going to better steal it, or maybe they won't. It's funny. Gary V, I don't know if you know him, Lee, I'm getting him introduced. He's like a social media guy, but he says, I'm going to give you all of this info about how I do everything because you ain't going to use it. So it doesn't matter anyways. You're just going to appreciate the podcast. And so I love that. So what was your most in that year, right? So in that first year, what was the most solar accounts you sold in a week?
18.
18 in a week?
Yeah.
Come on.
It's the best week.
What about a month?
32.
So did you just give up after that week? What'd you do? I don't know math. I'm sorry.
They all just lined up that's,
How do you sell it? How do you sell 18 in a week? How is that possible? You say it nonchalantly, dude. That's not. It
was things panned out. The next best one was 13 after that. Things just panned out. Like, it just was a week where I think the prior week I probably only did 5 or 6, and like, so there's a bunch that text me, yes, let's go. There's probably a couple referrals in there. I probably had a lead campaign that was working out well. And so it was just like bang, bang, bang. And some new homeowners that worked out. there's just times where it just tees up. It wasn't really planned or anything like that. But
Let me back up and wrap it all up. So are you planning? Are you Sunday planning? Are you weekly planning? Are you daily planning? Are you daily goal setting? Like what or are you, is it all mental? I mean, at the end of the day, what are you doing to do this?
I do all that. I mean, I do Sunday planning. So every Sunday I make sure I'm ready for the week. I know where I'm going to be every day. I know what appointments I have. I know what comebacks I have. And then every single morning I look at my calendar in the morning before I head out for the day. I know the area I'm going to knock. I know what my, path looks like throughout the city as I'm going appointment knock. Yeah, no, it's all planned. It's all planned.
Good. I just want everyone in our office, but especially all of our viewers, to just know that it's the same, no matter how everyone's cut from the same cloth in this industry that's successful. So this is going on, you're coming to summer, and this is all in Vegas, right? You're doing all this, and you're doing you're street knocking, you're doing new homeowners. Now, are you changing it up every other week? You're knocking around appointments. Like, how was that for you when you're executing this plan?
I would alternate. So setter closer wasn't really a thing. Like it was, you would have someone new and they would set a couple or a few. But when I was new, I didn't want to set for anyone. And that was my ego. In hindsight, maybe I should have even done that because my pull through wasn't great when I first started. But I didn't want to. And so I didn't like the idea of forcing others to set. I think that was actually a detriment to me and to my office as the way I build it now is purely setter closer. But I would have a day where it was just knocking. And I start my mornings where there's old people. So the first probably 9-10 months was strictly Vegas. And so I'm up Aliante, I'm finding the old people in the morning and I'm there until lunch. And then as soon as lunch ends, I go to the hood and I'm in the hood in the afternoon where people are going to be home. And then the second prime time hits, I'm going to new builds and I'm finding people in their 30s, 40s who are just getting off work, who have money, newer houses, stuff like that. And I'll spend a day that way. Then I'll spend my next day following up on old leads. So whether it's leads that I bought from a lead source, whether it's doors that I've knocked, follow-ups, anything like that, that day is mostly filled with driving. And I'm just drive, knock. And there's always appointments, filled in through all these days, but
right.
That's another day. Then I'd have a new homeowner day. And I just chase new homeowners all day, all over the city. And I just go new homeowner. And those were pretty much my 3 different days. And I would do, 2 cycles a week, right? 6 days a week.
I love it. And then, I don't know if you know this or not, but your story in recruiting is very similar to Bodie's, where Bodie, when he started recruiting copious amounts of people, he had them with him every day. And it was basically, he was on the doors at 1:30 and, he would have somebody in the car. And if he didn't get one by prime time, then they stayed with him and he didn't get off the doors or anything. Right. So you guys are very similar in that. So you started off with a couple of reps. How do you get from 5 reps to 600? How does that happen?
It was a combination of things, man. The first and most important thing I think is that it's not me. Like it's that I'm in the right system for my personality type, for who I am as a human being. Legacy Power is the right system for me. Luke Toon is the right mentor for me. Doug Robinson is the right mentor for me. They're the right people to help me make good decisions when I want to make bad decisions. And so that is the thing that I think has gone perfectly, is that I'm in the right system at the right company with the right tools. Titan Solar Power is the right partner for me to use for an installer. They are. I do really well with them. I work well with their people. So it's that, right? It's the right situation. It's the right time. And then it's just like, dude, I'm just grateful. And I'm working hard. That's it. And I'm working really hard. And so I think that I did more solar than everybody else that year, to be honest. I think that I beat the industry. And
yeah, I was gonna say in the country, not just legacy. Yeah.
I don't know how else to say that. Started to create talk, I think, throughout the industry, because loans are now a new thing. And so people, I'm clearing 10 grand a deal consistently, and I'm selling 10 of these things a week. And I'm installing 80% of what I sell after I got it dialed. And so the money is pretty wild, and people are hearing about that. And then there's like Big Check Friday, and that's what it kind of started to validate it. Is there was a week where I made, I want to say 97 grand. It could have been 87 or 97 on installs, like money that actually hit my account. And Luke sends me this screenshot. The CSL, the co-founder of Legacy, sends me this screenshot of like an Excel spreadsheet, and it's really ugly. And like, we have a sick marketing department, dude, but Luke just did this on his own. He's like, I'm gonna post this. And we're like, I don't know, dude. I don't know if we can post that. It feels weird telling people how much I'm making. We're like, but at the same time, they need to know. How many of my friends are still in alarms and have no idea, or are selling pests, or whatever, and have no idea what's possible. So we post it. And then our marketing team attacked us and wanted to kill us because it looked so bad. And by the next week, we had Big Check Friday. And so they started developing this thing where we'd post checks over a certain amount. And now I think it's 12 grand or something like that. But I was making 50 plus most every week. And a lot of the time, 100 plus. And so that created a lot of noise, and that created a lot of interest. And people are like, what is this guy doing? And I can't even tell you how many phone calls I got from someone that I met one time at an ADT dealer convention, or way back in the day at a security networks dealer thing. Like, and someone's just like, did you really make 87 grand in a week or 97 grand? And I'm like, yeah, fly down to Vegas. I will fly you down. I will put you in a hotel. Come spend a day with me on the doors. And that's what I did. And it worked. It started to build. I sold in a unique way. At Vivint, one thing that I learned really well is I came from doing takeovers the way that I did them before Vivint, which was, I think, a lot less refined, to where I always sold at a good RMR. If I'm selling ADT, I'm selling at $54.99 or whatever. But at Vivint, I'm selling at like $97 a month, and I'm knocking ADTs that are paying 45. And so, but I don't care what you're paying, because what I have to offer you is completely different than what you have right now. And I firmly believe that at Vivint. And that's how I feel about solar. I just feel like the value we have to offer people is just so much. There's so many things about solar that are so much better about than the way they get their power right now. And so it kind of just built itself out. People started to come out and follow me on doors. People were shadowing me and seeing that it's real. They're watching the deals close. They're watching the installs drop. They're seeing the checks from the company. And then that first year, when the year ended, the team's finally cranking. Like, there's some really solid people in the team. We're putting up 150, 200 a month. I'm starting to scale to, I've got a team in Phoenix. I've now kicked out a second team in Vegas that started doing 100, 150 a month. And from there, it just gained traction on its own. It's just, people heard about the division, Big Check Friday. Even within Legacy, we dominate Big Check Friday. My division does, because we're good. We know how to sell for the value in solar. And so people are making phenomenal money.
Yeah, man. I have nothing to add to that. So social media, you got off of it, and then you just all of a sudden came out of the woodworks, like with these big check for, like, oh, Seth hasn't been on social media for 8 years because he's been, joking, obviously, at a couple years, but like, he's knocking doors. All of a sudden, Big Check Friday comes. So what was your biggest check on Big Check Friday?
147,000, I think.
And so this happens, and it all starts to go. What's going on in your head, man? Like, I know you're coming from a level of gratitude, you're coming from a level of grit. When do you realize, because this comes a point in everybody's career in this industry, when you go, I can't knock anymore, I have to lead. So when does that happen? How long ago was that?
I learned over the years from leaders that did things that I didn't agree with, that I learned some lessons of things that I promised myself I would never do. Okay. And one of those things is, I promised myself that I would never let someone who worked for me work harder than me. And all I knew how to do as far as working hard was knock. And I thought that's what I had to do, is just knock and knock and knock. And so I probably wasted about 6 months of my time spinning my wheels by trying to knock while running a couple hundred at the time, maybe as much as 300 people in multiple markets, and probably not delivering the best service to them because it was just non-negotiable. I'm on doors 12 hours a day. If you need me, call me outside of knocking hours or come shadow me on the doors. Other than that, figure it out or text me. I allow them to text if they work for me. Or if it's like an emergency, you can call me. I'm not going to say I never answer my phone, but so I actually didn't reach that point until last fall, dude. And I probably before summer for sure, because I had a really big summer team that went out and did megawatt a month all summer last summer. And I probably should have focused on them a little bit more. My team in Phoenix, like I can see areas where I was wrong. And last fall is when it wasn't even, not even I could argue. Like, it was just like, dude, this isn't working. You're providing bad service to people. You're not being a good leader. You need to get off of the doors. There is no time left to knock. And the second that happened, I gained another 100 people within a month. I picked up like 4 teams the second that I allowed myself to disengage from the doors and start focusing on building and focusing on the leaders that I had now and giving better service to those people. The organization took off on another level and has actually continued to grow at a similar clip since then.
I love that. What was your work through with objections, man? Because, you got a lot of guys in here, like new hires come in, and I really want to touch on this for our door people that listen. Like, new guys come in, they're like, oh, somebody says not interested, I get scared, or they come with these hard objections, right? So what's your recommendation for your newer reps, man, when they're coming in and they're having a hard time with a certain objection, like, they're ugly panels, or I'm not interested, or, my cousin does solar, or, any of these, whatever, these objections that we get. What's your main recommendations for these guys of what to do when they hit these, hit this stuff, if that makes sense?
Until you're good enough to overcome every objection, I don't want you to ever walk away from a single objection. So keep fight until they kick you off your porch. Depends on how new they are. If you're in your first few months, fight until they kick you off their porch every single time. And it's not because I think you're going to close them. It's because you're not good enough yet. You need to get better.
What's it been like for you? I mean, you mentioned this in the beginning. You got guys that have been with you since the old days, since the rough and tough days. So what's it been like for you to bring them around? And what's it been like for you guys to grow together and experience this new life and this new opportunity together?
I mean, it like almost brings you to tears, You can't really put it into words, man. You watch your life change, and that's really cool. But what's even cooler is being part of someone else's life changing. And so whether it's the guys that did all the dirt with me, or whether it's guys that I know they did their own dirt, but they didn't do it with me, watching them come to a place where they have their own version of what I have right now, which is just a different life with a future and the ability to be a different person. There's nothing like that.
Okay, and then I know I want Lee to say a couple things to you because it's your boys, but you and I were texting on Instagram the other day, and I was just talking about time management, just because I had heard you on another podcast talk about some of the stuff, and I'm like thinking, like, we're in this new teams at work, and I've got a 90-day event that we're doing and competition, and obviously, like, I'm a competitive guy, and I work harder when I have something competing in. It's just the way that it is. And you said, manage your time because, everyone hits their wall. So can we elaborate on that a little bit? Like, have you had a recent wall in the last couple of years in solar? What's your recommendation for it? Like, how did you work through it, et cetera?
Actually, I had a wall 2 days ago, which I think was the day that you messaged me, and it was a different wall because I've been learning that working hard, like I said, doesn't necessarily mean that I have to be physically knocking doors, but I'm available pretty much 24 hours a day, and I do work pretty much all the time and grind pretty hard. And so, dude, I have been on the road for the last 6 months. I have teams in 15 different markets, and I believe that it's really important that I stay relevant to those people and that I find ways to bring them value. And the best way to do that is generally in person. And so I try to visit my teams really regularly. Before Friday, which it's Monday, before Friday I had not slept at my house for 2 nights in a row for the prior 7 or 8 weeks. And that's just because it had been a trip and then a weekend trip and then a week trip and then a weekend trip back to back. And I hit a wall. I was at a point of like exhaustion. I don't sleep really well on the road. I'm not a good sleeper anyways. And um, that was a wall. And I just had to accept that I have a limitation. I was supposed to go on a trip on Friday with my wife, with her family up to Bear Lake. And I had to just accept that I couldn't go and I needed to rest. And I did. So there's different, I mean, that was a wall for me, and it's never going to make sense to anyone else because I'm the only one who lived it. But you know, it's hard to be gone all the time. When I was on the doors, the what my walls would look like is for me mostly just temptation. It's just like I would want to take a break. I would want to go on a vacation. I would see somebody leave for a weekend and take a Friday off and a Saturday off, and I would just say, "Man, I bet he didn't have to plan that 2 weeks out." Like I bet, and it would tempt me to do that. What I meant when I was talking to you is that when you implement a new schedule, you're going to get tested. And so, if you're ratcheting up your hours, you know, a good example that relates to me is my diet. Like I like to lift weights, and a big part of, you know, getting stronger is eating a lot of food. That's hard for me. And so I recently ratcheted up and added a couple thousand calories to my diet to try and put on some size. And that's been really hard. And I hit a wall where I started feeling sick. And I had to decide, how important is this to me? This is just a stupid hobby that I have. Do I really want to make myself sick all the time by eating so many calories? But I knew if I pushed through it, my stomach would adjust. It's the same thing with doors. I didn't deal with that, to be honest. It was habitual for me. Knocking 12 hours a day is not hard for me. Doors are not hard for me. I enjoy knocking doors. It's the easiest part of my job. I would take that over the hard confrontations and conversations that I have to have every single day doing the job that I have now, anytime. It's way better. But when you're ratcheting up hours and you're making a big change to your schedule, like you're doing right now, Zach, you're going to reach a point where it's going to test you and where you're going to feel like you need to go back. And there's no excuse. There's no one else there. I don't care who you're knocking with. I don't care how close to Lee you are. You're going to have to decide if you're going to continue working to the point where that's comfortable and you adjust, you're going to give up and be a little bitch. It's your choice. Like, do you want to let your stomach stretch out and adjust to the extra calories that you need? Or are you going to go back to the old schedule because it was softer and it was easier for you? You're the only one that can make that decision.
That's amazing, Seth, the whole thing. I just want to jump in. First, thank you for coming on. You know, we've known each other for about 5 years. And for the listener base, I wanted to take the opportunity to validate some of the things that you've said and done through having had the experience to be able to work with you. You are what David Goggins would call an uncommon man amongst uncommon men. You know, I've known you for a long time, but I've never heard the story, and I've heard it many times, but laid out in that exact manner. To understand your transition from your prior life into doors. And what I heard was, you know, I'm in this house knocking with these guys and they're not getting deals. And my brain just says, hey, the grind is the grind. And we come from a similar background. And that's, I wake up and I grind until I can't grind anymore, which is at the very, very, very end of the day. You just took that into doors. So knowing you as long as I've known you, I've seen you knock with this ferocity. That being a man that's uncommon amongst uncommon men, where it almost appears you're just addicted to the doors, but it sounds more like that's just the way that it was. That's the man that you became. And one of the things that I love about our industry, one of my biggest takeaways from your story, having a similar history as you, is the doors are the equalizer. And where you come from or what you've done only matters in the fact that you can overcome it or supersede it or grow into a better person. Because when you're faced with doors, you either back away from them or you face the challenge and you overcome them. And that battle is won inside of our minds, and inside of our spirits, and inside of our hearts. And that's where grit comes from. And, you know, I remember you broke your leg at the event, Vivid, and I had to give you a piggyback to your car. And I didn't think, I literally had to carry you to your car. And I honestly didn't think your foot was broken, and your foot was broken. And you were in the office the next day, and we were in a competition, and where everybody literally, I mean, this is the exact way that it happened. Everybody's like, what are you doing here? And you're like, we're in a competition. What are you doing here? And you're like, I'm knocking doors. And every single one of us was begging you and trying to talk you out of it. And you're like, no, and you're on these crutches. I don't know where you got them from. And it was, man, and you knocked for like 4 or 5 days on a broken foot. And everybody was telling you, no. And you're like, I'm going to win. We're going to win. We're going to win. And that, you know, really injured your, and like you said, but that is just the level of commitment. And what I talk to my people about is that your why, your core person has to be so much bigger.
Oof.
And so much stronger than outside pain sources. You know, and you look at guys like David Goggins, who, you know, went through buds multiple times with broken bones, but it can't be a toothache, or somebody was mean to me, or my wife was mad at me, or I had a bad day, or I didn't get enough sleep, or I'm hungry. It has to be this core driving engine that says, I will not quit. I will not fail, no matter what. And that's my biggest takeaway from you. And just to validate your work hours, man, I've seen it. I saw it for years. You are a monster. And I'm going to go ahead and submit to, I'll tap out on the Can You Beat Seth. Because 100%, man, on work ethic, I would be out there for 8 or 9 hours, 10 hours sometimes. And you just would outwork me every day, you know, and you just do. And you outwork everybody, you know, and I've seen it. And that's the win, man. And it's just, it's, you know, I just envision you as the top gladiator inside the ring. And I've been so impressed with what you've done with Legacy and with your teams and teaching and growing, you know, 240 plus accounts in your first year, and then, you know, putting in megawatts a month from this machine that you've created and where you came from. And, you know, this is one of the things that has always been taught to us. Don't overestimate what you can do in 1 year and underestimate what you can do in 5. And here you are years and years later, and look at the place that you built yourself. And I just have respect and admiration for a man like you. I'm proud to call you my friend, but that's self-made from doing what we do here. And there's just no excuses in you, man, not even a broken foot. So much gratitude. And this was an amazing podcast for me to hear the story, you know, and if there's any of our listeners are out there and they have an excuse, get rid of it, man. There can't be any excuses, because when you look at the best of the best and the people that we admire and love and respect that are in a place that we want to be, they don't have excuses. They have goals and they have action, and they are where their feet are. Their feet are climbing the mountain. So mad love and respect, Seth. I appreciate it so much, brother.
Love you, brother. Appreciate
Yeah, let me touch on that, what he just said, and elaborate on it a little bit. Like, what's Seth's 10-year plan? Like, where do you see yourself, and what's kind of your vision of where now, you know, breaking through this last barrier? Where do you see yourself?
I see the solar as a whole is going to continue to grow at an alarming rate. The fact that they're all love to our sister industries all over the place, the fact that there are still people selling pest and security and direct TV tells you that everybody doesn't fully understand solar, just as a fact, not in a biased opinion way or anything like that. It is a fact that you don't fully understand solar, or else you'd be selling it. Just because I 7x my income with the exact same skill set, exact same work ethic year one, 7x. And I think most people do something comparable to that ratio based on how hard they work when they come into solar, unless they start working less hard. It's really hard for me to tell you, Zach, where I'll be in 10 years. I know what my goals are, and I continue to hit them. Like the volume we're doing right now, we haven't done that for a long time. A lot of that is new volume. Over 100 of those reps are very new. And so new to my organization. And so it's going to continue to grow. What I know is that I need to install over 60 megawatts in a year next year, and that's my goal. And because I have a good friend that did 60 megawatts in a year, 1 year. His name is Mark Toon. You should have him on the podcast sometime. He's my boss, Luke Toon's twin brother, and I do need to beat him because the fact that he has a year where he beat me is just completely unacceptable. So I know that's going to happen next year. I know that the division will continue to grow. My next goal right now is 1,000 deals a month. Right now, I'm sure in July we'll probably do 750 or so with everything. My division's spread out, man. We got franchises and people all over the place, but
Yeah.
I'll probably do 750 in July. We need to get to 1,000 a month. And so I just have tiers like that. After I hit 1,000, the next tier is going to be 1,500. After I hit 1,500, the next tier is going to be 2,000. I don't have a plan to go anywhere. I know for a fact I'll never stop working. It's not about money. If it was about money, I wouldn't have continued working after making 2 years and $2 million in commissions as a first-year solar rep. Like I would have taken a break. I didn't take a single day off, It's not about that. It's about growth. It's about success. And it's about the fact that I enjoy working hard. I enjoy who I work with. I enjoy who I work for. And I enjoy every person who works within my division. And I'm going to continue to do everything I can to build underneath those people, to build them up, and to build my division up, to build Legacy Power up. And it's not going to stop.
Yeah. And I'm glad you answered it that way, because it's not necessarily always the exact goal, but just that people can hear that we have, like Casey said on the podcast, and coming from Brian Tracy's books, it's we can only see what we can see as far as we can see it. And once we move down the field a little bit more, the goalpost moves and things get a little bit bigger. And that's the beauty behind this entire industry. We celebrated Independence Day yesterday, and it's like this is the most independent industry we could be in, to where we can really come and create our own destiny. And I think you've brought a different vibe to the podcast that I really respect, and I've been extremely excited about this. I don't get nervous that much anymore with the guys that come on. I feel pretty confident myself, but I was ready, dude, for multiple reasons. But I will give you a shout out for my own personal growth of like, I went through something recently that was a big, I think, major decision in my career in this industry. And I'm a pretty loyal guy as well. And I didn't even know you. I had heard about you from my mentor, Lee, and from a couple of other guys. And I just had come to the thought that I needed to reach out to get a minute of your time. And you carved out 30 minutes, and you were a busy guy, and you gave me the time. And I appreciate you doing that for me, bro. And I hope to one day soon meet you in person, which I'm sure will happen. But I appreciate everything you guys do and what your team does. And yeah, there's a bunch of guys on my list, on our list, I should say, of people within your organization that that we want to interview, because you guys are setting a bar that I appreciate and we appreciate. And it makes you guys are motivating me on a daily basis, and I love that. I love the hype, I love the motivation, and it's always love. And I haven't gotten anything negative back from you or anybody else on your squad, so that's another thing too, man. So I appreciate. I'm going to tap right now, because this is going to be the longest one we've ever done, which I'm super excited about, but I don't really have anything to add, bro. And I just appreciate you carving out the time and coming on here and giving your time and constantly giving your time, dude. So just thank you, Seth, so much.
You mentioned that you haven't gotten any negativity or anything from me or my people. And that's something that I meant to bring up before, that I wanted to make sure and touch on today. There is a really toxic scarcity mentality in our industry that a lot of people suffer from, where they believe that I don't know where it comes from, but it's generally fear, right? And I believe that people feel scared or threatened by someone recruiting their people, or people feel scared or threatened by someone selling deals in the same market as them. And one thing, I'm far from perfect, but one thing that I think that I do well is I put love first, and I love my people. And I don't look like the most vulnerable, loving, like, dude, man, but I am. I'm pretty honest about how I feel, and I love my people, and I put that first, and I put my relationship with them first. And that sometimes puts me in a place where I have to decide, do I actually love this person, or do I love that they work for me? And I do my best to say that I love this person and I keep those relationships alive. The reason I wanted to talk about this is because not that anybody cares what I have to say, or that if there's one influence that I can have on this industry, it would just be that we stop acting like people are tools that work for us, and we treat them like human beings that we care about, whether they're making money for us or not. And we stop coming from a mentality of scarcity, of saying, because you recruit my guys, because you're a competitor, I can't help you, because I'm better than you, or my company's better than you, or I don't like any of that stuff, and I try really hard to stay away from it. I've had friends recruit my people, and it doesn't affect my relationship with them. I've had friends that I've recruited their people, and I've kept a good relationship with them. And I've had leaders in my organization who I feel very close to break my heart and leave my organization, generally because I did something wrong, and I've maintained those relationships. And I bring that up just because that's the one influence I want to have on people, is make the relationships real, make them relationships that last. And you don't got to tell your people you love them and do all that. It makes a bunch of my guys super uncomfortable, and I don't care. I tell them anyways. I don't care. Love is too important to me. But just put the relationship first. Treat people like people, and try to be a person who actually cares about people instead of pretends to care about them to manipulate them into making you money.
Googled the word notorious, and it says publicly or generally known as for a particular trait. So I think without maybe you even knowing that, I think it really packages up what you're trying to do and what your movement is. So again, bro, thanks a ton, man. And I just appreciate it.
Sure. Appreciate your time, my man.